This is Only the Strong Survive, a podcast powered by Kahn Media, where we dive deep into the world of business, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Dan Kahn, and I'm honored to have you join us today. So, let's get ready to learn some survival skills together. Hey everyone, welcome back to Only the Strong Survive. I'm your host, Dan Kahn, and today's guest is the one, the only Bruce Meyer. Bruce has spent decades helping shape the collector car world. He is the founding chairman of the Peterson Automotive Museum, the creator of the Rodeo Drive Concours d'Elegance, co-founder of Peninsula Classics Best of the Best, president of Meyer Pacific, one of the most respected ambassadors for automotive history anywhere in the world. And for many years, Bruce led Geary's Beverly Hills, transforming a family-owned boutique into a luxury retail and mail-order powerhouse. He's also a lifelong racer, collector, and has dedicated his career not just to preserving remarkable automobiles, but ensuring future generations appreciate the stories, the people, and the culture behind them. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. Nice introduction.
Well, thanks for doing this.
Listen, I have to pinch myself because growing up in a non-car loving family and kind of working against the tide, just following my dream, I'm living the dream, and it's very humbling to hear that, and I'm very proud to be here and involved with so many automotive activities.
So for our listeners, I will say that you and I have known each other for quite a while. I consider you a friend. We've worked together on a ton of different projects. So what some people may not know is what you just said is I think most of our guests who come on that are car people come from some sort of car family background. And I know you didn't have that experience, but you also were fortunate to grow up in Southern California at probably the single greatest car culture moment in history. So can you give our listeners a little bit of a background about what growing up was like, where you grew up, and how you kind of were exposed to the whole car thing and bikes?
Sure. So I was born in 1941, which was the perfect year ever to be born, and in Southern California. It was such a sublime, great place. Hot rodding was really hadn't even started yet, and when I went to grammar school in the late 40s, hot rodding was just coming around, and I subscribed to Boy's Life, which was a scouting magazine, and Hot Rod magazine when it first came out, because I always loved hot rods. And being in Southern California, the birth really of hot rodding as I know it, it was just a sublime, perfect place to be. And so I grew up loving hot rods. My family, I never wanted for anything, but we didn't have any excess. So the idea of wasting a minute or wasting $1 was just not, part of my upbringing. And maybe the biggest waste of time would be cars and hot rods. My grandparents couldn't afford cars. My parents would buy stuff that it didn't excite me, really, really pure transportation, no style. So I did not grow up in a car family. If I talked about, cars, it was forbidden. And I learned at an early age not to involve my parents. Now, the good news is my dad would not know the difference between a Pontiac, a Peugeot, or a Porsche. He just couldn't relate to that, which was good because it allowed me to kind of work the fringes and not get detected. So we had a very strong work ethic in our family, and I always had jobs. Gardening was the easiest thing because I could start that when I was younger. I also had a paper corner. And I say I had the best paper corner in LA, and I really believe I did. It was in front of Pizza Mozza, which was on Highland Avenue in Melrose, which was the kind of gateway street to the Hollywood freeway. I had the evening paper, and I was probably making $2 or $3 a day when friends of mine would get 50 cents a week for their allowance. So I saved every bit of it, and I gardened, and I set bowling pins at a bowling alley, which was maybe the worst job I ever had, because that was before.
That was a manual job? I didn't even know that.
It was as manual as can be, and I was the young pledge, and most of the people that said bowling pins were heavy drinkers. Let me just say that. And I did all the work. They'd say, Bruce, go over to lane 5 and work that. And it's very loud, and I guess a bit dangerous. It never occurred to me. And sweaty. No air conditioning back then. So it was a pretty awful job. I did that for probably 6 months, and then I just had enough. And but it was the Pan Pacific Bowl, Pan Pacific Auditorium. And Dan, I don't know if you remember the Pan Pacific Auditorium, but that's where the Motorama, it was where all the car shows were. And that was about a 10-minute bike ride from where I grew up. I grew up very near Highland and Melrose.
Okay.
And we rode our bikes downtown LA, Hollywood, everywhere. I mean, because bicycling was, what we did.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I'd ride to the Pan Pacific Auditorium and watch them uncover the new cars. We just waited, to see what the new cars would look like, because every year was a different car. Anyways, I could just go on and on about the Motorama, but I just grew up loving cars. It's in my DNA. I say I have that mutant gene. You can't put it in somebody, and you really can't take it out. It's just there, and I love cars. And I think more than cars, I love car people. That really means the most to me. And when I go to Cars and Coffee or car shows, it's more to see my friends, and there's not a lot of cars that I haven't seen as such, but I just love the people. It's the interchange, and that's probably why we've gotten along so well over many, many years.
Yep.
Dan, I mean, I so admire what you have built in Kahn Media, and you've handled our business and Rodeo Drive and the Quail and Rolex. I mean, you have built an incredible brand.
Well, thank you, and due in no small part to you and your guidance. So I appreciate you.
Well,
I'm curious, Bruce, if when you think back to the early days and knowing you didn't grow up in a car household, but you did grow up sort of surrounded by car mecca at the moment that it was really kind of happening. Do you have any early memories where something drove by that just stopped you and you said, like, whether, whatever it was, like, wow, that's like, do you have any of those kind of like childhood memories where you had that moment?
I had a couple. And I went to Third Street School. I grew up right in LA. My high school was a Los Angeles high school, which was right, it would be inner city. I mean, it was right in the middle of it. But our grammar school was Third Street School, and it was right next door to the Art Center. And Art Center back at that point were mostly automotive designers, and they would drive custom cars and hot rods. And I remember it, kind of like a fence crow, looking when other kids were playing kickball or whatever games you played in grammar school. I was looking at the cars going in and out of Art Center, dreaming about that. So I remember the cars going in and out of Art Center, which were hot rods and custom cars. And then the other thing I saw I saw a 300 SL Gullwing. That probably back in the early 50s impacted me. I couldn't believe anything like that would be on the street. And I lived in Hollywood, and at that time Mercedes of Hollywood was a factory dealership. And I remember seeing a 300 SL Gullwing, and I mean, I've had a Gullwing since 1964. And I think if there's one car that kind of does it all, it's a 300 SL Gullwing. So those are kind of two automotive memories. I loved hot rods and customs and a Gullwing.
I mean, talk about a timeless design. And I imagine in the 50s, you're still a kid. You see that thing must have looked like a spaceship that had landed in front of you when a Gullwing. Back compared to anything else design-wise back then, that thing was unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. It was, when you think it came out in 55, when you think of what was available in 55, Ford, had a T-Bird, but there was something about a Gullwing that just, it raced. It was just next level. So that was a vision that I never forgot.
So you started working young, you're saving your money, you get into your teenage years, your family has a family business. I'm assuming as a teenager, at some point you said, okay, I'm buying a car. What was it and how did you navigate that with dad? Like were you able to kind of get away with something that he wouldn't have approved of, or?
Well, the good news is dad was clueless. And I literally had, pictures that I'd cut out of Hot Rod magazine. I mean, I had my dream cars. But when I turned 16, sadly, my great aunt died and left my sister and I her 50 Plymouth. Now, a 50 Plymouth was not on my wish list. Fortunately, it was a two-door and it was a kind of a fastback. And my sister worked, so she drove it to her work in the days, and I got it on the weekends. And that was my first car, the first car that my parents knew about, anyways. But because what I'd done, Dan, it's just hard to imagine you could buy a motorcycle for $50 or $100. But you could do that. You could buy a 40 Ford for $100. I mean, things were just cheap back then. So I remember when I was like 13 years old, maybe 14, I bought a 650 BSA.
That's a pretty hot bike.
Yeah, well, and it had the big high bars, because I like that look. Ape hangers, I guess we called them.
Yeah.
Just things were so cheap. As I say, $100 could buy you a lot of motor vehicle. So I bought a motorcycle. My parents did not know about that. I hid it in a friend's garage, and kind of on the weekends or special times I'd take it out and cruise, because I wasn't old enough I didn't have a driver's license, and I could just, those were days you could get away with stuff and kind of enjoy the hobby. If I'd have bought a 32 Ford, I don't think my parents would have known, but I probably couldn't have seen over the steering wheel because I wasn't very tall at that time. But anyways, I started with motorcycles, and I loved motorcycles. I dated my wife on a motorcycle because I didn't have a car when I first met her. I was between cars. But I've loved motorcycles probably as, from age 14 to probably 25. Life wasn't worth living if you couldn't have a motorcycle. I mean, it meant that much to me. So I was loving those. And when I was in college, away from my parental supervision, I started racing motorcycles. And at that time, again, it was casual. It was called TT Scrambles, and it was, dirt riding. And I did that for 3 or 4 years and enjoyed that very much. And so I've always loved motorcycles. That until I turned 75, and then I just quit Bonneville, motorcycles, snow skiing. I went into what I call preservation mode. It was an enlightened moment that I realized that I had lived to be 75, and at that point had never had a serious crash. I wasn't crippled. I was in decent shape, and I thought, I'm going to just preserve this, because I thought 75 was.
I would argue that you're in better than decent shape, Bruce. Because you're what, 80, 84, 85 now?
Yeah, I'm turning 85 this year, and it's just hard to imagine.
You're in unbelievable shape. I think you're in better shape than most 65-year-olds, so well done.
Well, I thank God every day. And, I say God had a plan for me. I didn't grow up with, giant expectations. And so every day is a gift, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well, let's take a minute, because one of the things that I think about with you is that it seems like you've sort of built your life around passion. And whether it's Geary's and a passion for customer service, or car collecting, the Peterson, the network of friendships and people you surround yourself with. Talk a little bit about Geary's and tell us kind of when did you get involved and how, because I know you really broke some new ground there. So if you can kind of tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Sure. Well, just taking a step back, my dad grew up very humble beginnings. I mean, I don't want to say dirt poor because they had a roof over their head, but he didn't have a lot of money. And he worked at a hardware store downtown Los Angeles called Eastern Columbia. The building is still there. It's a green building. It says Eastern on top. But my dad grew up in the hardware business. And then in the 40s, he was able to get an appliance franchise, kind of selling appliances at department stores in Alhambra and Glendale. And it was an okay business. It was okay, and we got by. And then a store called Whitefront came along, and Whitefront was a category killer. It was a discount appliance store, and literally put my father out of business. Within a month, my dad had no business at all. So he was completely had nothing going on. And in Beverly Hills was a store called Geary's, and it was kind of a small, I don't want to say department store, but it was specialized in gifts and art supplies and small appliances. And my dad had nothing going on. And Mr. Geary had died, and a local family had taken it over and done very poorly. There's something about restaurants and retail that attract people. When you have a few extra dollars, you think, well, I'm going to open a restaurant or I'm going to open a retail store. And there's nothing more difficult. And they learned that, and these people learned that. They bought Geary's because they didn't, after Mr. Geary died, they didn't want to see it go away. So they took it over and they ran it for about 3 years, and they ran it into the ground. There was almost nothing left. And fortunately for my dad, he was looking for an opportunity, and a friend has said, you should go talk to the people from Geary's. So my dad went over. They liked him. He was a hardworking guy, very bright businessman. And he bought the store, and he bought it for nothing. They basically turned it over to him. I remember I came across the original contract. My dad bought the entire business for $30,000 with 5 years to pay for it.
Wow.
Which was a pretty good deal, I guess. I don't know, because I don't know how things were back then. But at that time, my grandmother worked there, my mother, my dad. I had to be there after school. My dad gave me bus money, and of course I'd hitchhike and pocket the bus money. But why not? But I grew up at that store, and at that time, you have to understand, again, my dad, I can't emphasize what a great father he was. I would never be who I am today without my mom and my dad. That was the greatest gift God ever gave me, great parents. But my dad had, and I'm being kind when I say no taste at all. And when God, I love him, but in their 50 years of marriage with my mom, he never picked out a tie and shirt and coat combination. He just didn't. He couldn't put that all together. And so when we'd go shopping for Geary's, he would want to go to and buy closeouts. Well, so he was that generation, the Depression generation. My mom grew up in West Virginia. Back then, people that survived the Depression had a little extra cash, and my mom just was always waiting for the next depression, and she just said, don't buy real estate, don't buy anything, just save your money. And so that was my mom's mantra. My dad was maybe a little more creative, but when we went shopping, my dad always wanted to see what the closeouts were. Well, I'm of the generation where brands were important, and Baccarat and Lalique and different known brands and style were very important to me, and they weren't necessarily to my dad, because whatever I buy from those brands you could buy for less somewhere else. And so we always had that back and forth. But so I brought in the better brands to the store, and my mom had a great sense of style. She worked in the store, and she was like the best salesperson. Everybody wanted to deal with my mom because she had a great sense of style. So I probably got the style part from my mom and the business part from my dad, but we did okay, and the store kind of existed. We added some more salespeople. All the salespeople were elderly. Let me just say that. And so when I got out of college in '64, my specialty was bartending. I took a bartending job at Lake Tahoe, and then I took another job in retail back in Michigan because I didn't really want to go to work for Geary's and all those old people. And dealing with stuff that I didn't really relate to. So after I came back from college and I opened a candle store in Beverly Hills, which I don't know how deep you want it. This is a deep dive. But anyway, so I opened a candle shop, and
Which I guess that was what, the 60s?
that was in the 60s.
So
And
that was the thing back then, right? Like incense and candles and
100%. I mean, I thought that was the future, and it's exactly right. It was incense and candles, and I'll just show you this. This was, I don't know if you can see that.
yeah. The stash. I like it.
Yeah, I don't know where the camera is, but that was me in 1968 when I opened my candle shop. So my dad said, "You got to come to work with me." And so after a few years, I relented and I went to work with my dad, and the rest is history. But we annexed the candle shop onto our main store. We called it Geary's North, and then I got into the mail order business. By the way, I don't know if it's the same today, but when you're in your 20s, you know everything. And
Mm-hmm.
I was in my 20s. I knew about mail order and retail, and it was the height of my intellect. My dad knew very little, and I knew it all. That was in the 20s. And then as you get older, you realize, maybe you didn't know it all, and maybe he did. So we had that. But and I remember I was talking to a friend of mine just the other day, and I remember we had. By the way, when you're in your 20s, somebody that's 40 or 50 seems old, and so our salespeople at the store were old, probably in the 40s and 50s and 60s. But I thought we needed younger salespeople, so I started to bring in younger salespeople, and I realized all they wanted to do was socialize, and they weren't as good as the old people. Anyways, I learned a lesson there.
So somewhere in there, things start to get traction. Geary starts to do well. You start to build a career. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past, but you talked about that Gullwing being kind of the car for you. The car for me that when I was a kid, I saw that blew my mind and said, oh my God, that is the prettiest thing I've ever seen, is a car that you're very familiar with. And I think it might have been your car, 275 GTB4.
Oh, right.
So tell the listeners, because I think as Geary's started to become successful, you have a 275 story that's pretty incredible.
I'm more a Porsche guy than anything. And it really started in 1960 when my father, early on when I turned 16, which would have been in the 50s, my dad says, if you save your money, because I wanted a hot rod, and I wanted to spend my money on a 40 Ford. My dad said, look, just save your money, and when you're ready, I'll help you buy your first car. I was going to buy, and this was, so in 1960, I was 19 years old. My dad thought I was ready, but what he didn't know, I'd had all these motorcycles, and I'd had a car life before that, but he didn't have a clue. and I bought I was going to order a 1960 Chevy Biscayne, the cheap body style, which I know would have appealed to him, and then a big engine and a 4-speed. So I was very much into buying a muscle car. And then I rode my bicycle up to Competition Motors in Hollywood, and John von Neumann, who owned the dealership, told me that if I picked up a Porsche in Europe, I could buy it for $2,700. So I went back to my dad and I told him, look, I'm going to buy a compact car. And he thought it was 60 horsepower.
I'm doing something sensible, Dad.
Yeah, and he bought into it. So I bought a Porsche, and then I told him, I think I'm going to take a year out of college and travel in Europe and get culture and learn about the world. And he thought that was okay. So all I wanted to do was get to Europe to buy that, pick up that Porsche. But anyway, so that started my life with Porsches, and I've had Porsches pretty much ever since. And I don't know where I'm going with this, except that I bought a Porsche in 1967 from a dealership in LA, SD Zipper, and they were the Ferrari Porsche dealer. And in the showroom, or in the service department, was a bright yellow 275 GTB4 Cam. And I was just starstruck. It was the prettiest car I'd ever seen, and I still believe the 275 GTB is the most beautiful Ferrari ever.
I agree.
And oh my God! So I told the service manager if that car is ever for sale. Now, I didn't know how much a Ferrari was, but 3 years later, maybe 3.5 years later, the car came available. Kind of a long story, but I bought that car, that bright yellow 275 GTB4, and I paid a little over $10,000 for it, which was my net worth at the time.
That was a
And
lot of money back then.
well, it was a lot of money. I had just gotten married, and I just had to have that car. And I've been married to the same woman for 56 years, and she's been great with the cars. She's never said, "Well, you can't afford that, or you have too many, or you shouldn't buy that." She's always been very supportive, and that really makes a difference. So I bought the car, and that was my daily transportation. That was my collection, everything. And then one day, I had it parked in front of my store, and a lady backed into the front and put a little, like a thumbprint ding in the nose, and I figured I better drive it less and find something else to drive. But I had that car 56 years.
So
And
tell the listeners about the teacups, because every time I've heard that story, it blows my mind.
Sure. Do you have an image of that?
No, we can find one. We'll
I've
add it to this.
I can send it to you. So
Okay.
so we were celebrating Italian Week at Geary's, and I was very careful never to mention cars around my dad because he would just, oh my God, I never mixed the cars in the store at all. But for Italian Week, I thought what I would do is bring my car in, and I'd seen this done in the UK where they put a car. Actually, in the UK, they did it with a double-decker bus, so I knew I could do it with my Ferrari. They put the car up on cups, and I thought cappuccino cups, perfect. So I took the doors off the store, which was a really big deal. Big glass doors. I had people come in, and I remember my dad. Somebody mentioned to my dad, "You know what Bruce is doing? He's taking the doors off the store and he's driving his Ferrari into the store." And I remember my dad coming out. He was just like he in disbelief, and not a good disbelief. And I was driving the car into the store under its own power, and behind me were the evening news. Because we had, I think Joe Molina, or I forget who it was that was handling our PR at the moment, said, told them what we were doing, and I guess it was a slow news day, and so in following me were these newsmen with the cameras, and then my dad thought, now that's cool, so he was pretty excited about that. So we brought the car in, we jacked it up, and we balanced it on little cappuccino cups, and it made Motor Trend, it made every news. It was like it was a very slow news day, and we got publicity everywhere. And I can send you a picture of that because it really, really was a moment.
I would love to share that on the show. And I have thought this for years, that for a businessman who's never claimed to be a PR guy, you are the best PR guy I've ever met in my entire life, because you tell a great story, and you know how to entertain people, and you understand, I think, intrinsically what resonates with people. So I think that's phenomenal.
Well, maybe it's the love of people or what I'd like myself, but
yeah. At what point in all this, Bruce, now when does Mr. Peterson come into the picture? Because I know he played a big role in the chapters that follow.
So there's a group called YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization. And when in Beverly Hills, it's another hour story, but I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary Club and got very involved in the community. I joined this group called Young Presidents Organization, and I really didn't want to join it, but a friend of mine made me, and I thought, well, I'll join it and then I'll bail out. But it turned out I didn't bail out, because a member of Young Presidents Organization was a fellow named Robert E. Peterson, the founder of Peterson Publishing, which was Motor Trend, Hot Rod, a lot of different titles. And Pete and I it was like meeting your hero. I mean, to meet Robert E. Peterson was amazing. And his wife, Margie, was beautiful. She was Miss Rheingold, which at the time was maybe more important than Miss America.
Wow.
And so Margie and Pete became really good friends. Sadly, their two children died in a plane crash. So they had no children, and I just got along great with them, and we became very close friends. And Robert E. Peterson, even though he started Hot Rod Magazine and a lot of car magazine, he wasn't really a car guy. Like, his life was in balance. Mine was way out of balance. Mine was all about cars. But he had a real sense of what to buy. He bought art. He would buy he was what I call an opportunistic buyer. If somebody needed money for a piece of real estate or a piece of art, he would buy it if it was the right price. And he knew what the right price was. He was just that guy that knew how to buy. And so the Peterson building was for sale, and Robert E. Peterson bought it. And he wasn't sure. It's a whole city block. And and now it's in the epicenter of Museum Row and the starting point of the Miracle Mile. But Peterson saw something in that whole city block that made him go ahead and buy it. And he came to me and he said, "Bruce, what do you think if we put a car museum here?" Well, I mean, really, that appealed to me. So I got involved right at the very beginning. And I don't know how much time we want to spend on this, but we associated ourselves with the Natural History Museum, which was an established museum in Los Angeles, because they actually had some cars donated to them over the years, and they had no place to display it. So we figured we'll get involved with the Natural History Museum. They have cars. They're a museum with a capital M. And that's kind of how we started was with the Natural History Museum. I was on the board of the Natural History Museum. Peterson was on the board of the Natural History Museum. And that kind of got us started. It was mismatched, doesn't begin to describe what a bad marriage that was. At the time, our executive director had a very short fuse. The Natural History Museum cared less about us. We thought we would get 1 million. We were so naive. We thought we'd get 1 million people a year through that museum. At the time, there was a bus tour. Oh God, it was a tour company that did movie stars' homes and tour buses. Forget the name of it now.
Star Tours, right? Was it Star Tours?
It was like Star Tours, but it was another company. But it was a big company, and they had big buses. By the time we opened the museum, they were bankrupt. So that was. That didn't happen. And by the time we opened the museum, on our best year, we might have had 100,000 people through there. It was the whole pro forma Gray Line tours. It was called the Gray Line tours. And they were like Greyhound. It was Gray Line tours. And they went bankrupt and went out of business. All of our pro formas were just built on bad math. I didn't do any of the pro formas, but it was done by the Natural History Museum and their bean counters, and with Peterson's money and with the Natural History Museum. It seemed like a good idea that wasn't a good idea. So after a few years, maybe 5 or 6 years, we had a big falling out, and the Natural History Museum wanted to sell the property. They had one of the big box stores, I forget what it was, Home Depot, or one of them wanted it because it was a big store. It was built as a department store. It was built as Seibu, a Japanese department store. Then it became Orbax, and then it became a derelict, empty for a lot of years. Anyway, so that's when I really went to work. And I was the ombudsman between keeping the museum and the Natural History Museum and the Petersons and all the powers. It was a real war. And I was the guy that kept it all together and, worked really hard to make
and
it.
transitioned it into sort of its own entity, right? So kind of separated from the Natural History Museum. And for those listening because there's people listening to the show who probably don't know what the Petersen was even before the big remodel 10, 11 years ago. So, I mean, it was its own thing for many years. And then you and David were at the epicenter of sort of the rebirth of it as well, right?
Yes. So when we established the Petersen Museum, we put together a board, and David Sidoric, I met David not long after we started the Petersen, and we're still very good friends today. Well, the Natural History Museum, probably every natural history museum in the country, their displays are dioramas, and dioramas don't change. They'll have a dinosaur or a leopard in a tree with a deer or something, and it's just they do these dioramas, which are settings of the animals, and they did the Petersen the same way. We had a car stuck in the mud. We had a blacksmith shop. We had all these a little dealership. We had all these dioramas, which couldn't be changed. And so, if you'd seen the Petersen once, you'd basically seen it. And we found out that almost all of the visitors to the Petersen was their first time. And once you'd go through it, you'd seen it, and it was over. So, so I was even tired of it. David was tired of it. So David was in Europe with this fellow Gene Cohn, who had a big architectural firm, Cohn, Pedersen and Fox, KPF, and they'd done big buildings all over the world. And so David came back and said, why don't we just give the Petersen an all new look? And that's basically, in short, what happened. And we literally gutted every display. The exterior of the Petersen, we just kind of dolled up what was an old department store with fins on it. It just didn't work. You could pass that building every day of your life and not know what was inside. So we decided that what we would do, and this was led by David, we wanted to make that building so extraordinary, keeping the hot rod colors of silver, red, and chrome. And we interviewed Frank Gehry, Chris Bangle, KPF, all the great architectural firms, and we said, come up with something different and wonderful. And KPF, they are totally responsible for the look of that museum. Frank Gehry was great. He said, I'd love to do it. And he said it'll be $1 million just to get my brain thinking. And we did not have $1 million, to waste. And we looked in Frank Gehry's office, and there's lots of building designs there that never got built. And we thought, we give him $1 million. He designs something that we can't afford, and that just becomes a pinup on his architectural wall. So KPF again did our entire design, never asked us for a penny. He just said, Bruce, if you go with the idea, then we'll become your architect. So that's what happened. And we did an outrageous design with those chrome bands, silver bands. They were done by a company called Zahner in Kansas City. It all came out on trucks. Everything fit. It was all computer done. And when we got it opened, the architectural critics threw us under the bus.
I was there for that.
Oh my. They said we were the Edsel of architecture. It's Robert E. Petersen's thumbprint. They came up, they were very clever in telling how awful we were. And now we're the darling of museums worldwide. We've been voted the best museum in the world by every metric, every group. And honestly, we are. And what really turned us around was a fellow named Terry Cargus.
Yep.
That guy, I love him like a brother. His brother and I were friends for now probably 60 years. Terry and I have been friends for 50. At the time, we had an executive director that just didn't get it. So we decided, or I guess I was the one leading party, and I decided that we've got to get somebody in here. And truthfully, I talked to Gordon McCall, and I did a little homework, and I came up with the idea that Terry Cargis was the guy. I never worked with Terry. I just believed in him. And I went to our board, and they said, no, we've got to do something where you send out an RFP, and we've got to do this because we're a big museum. We got to do it publicly. I said, bullshit. Let's just bring Terry in. He's going to be better than what we have. And Terry came in. He was created for this job.
Yep.
He worked for Disney. He owned his own race team. He worked for Roush. He knew cleanliness, discipline, how to staff, keeping your staff happy, how to pick a staff. I credit Terry with the rebirth of the Petersen. As much as David Sidorik and I did, and much of the groundwork, it was Terry that is responsible for the Petersen that we have today.
He is the heart and soul of it. I could not agree more. And to walk into an institution the size and scope of the Petersen and see the executive director cleaning the counter in the bathroom, which I've seen, just like you, I'm sure, dozens of times, like that, from a cultural tone perspective, that tells you everything you need to know about the culture he built there. Every job matters. Every person counts. So
100%.
That's really cool.
100%. Yeah, no, it was. And you talk about bathrooms. I mean, I wish my home bathroom were as clean as the bathrooms in the Petersen. So if anybody comes in, be sure and look at those bathrooms. The chrome is like Concours level. And that's what Terry does. I mean, he is just meticulous and as kind a chief executive officer as you could ever get. Loves people. Great guy and a very dear friend.
So, Bruce, shifting gears a little bit, I do want to talk about leadership and legacy. One of the things I think about you is you are an incredible connector. And I think about all the friendships and relationships that exist because you have this seemingly sort of natural ability to kind of put people together in a way that I've never really seen before. And I wonder, collectors, manufacturers, race car drivers, museum leaders, designers, philanthropists, enthusiasts, these are like, you live in all these sort of seemingly disparate worlds and somehow manage to always get these people together. Is that something that just comes, like, where does that come from? And is that something that you do intentionally, or is that just a byproduct of who you are?
I would say a byproduct, just what I love. I've been so blessed to meet my heroes. And I'm sitting here at my desk and looking at a Dan Gurney for president. And, Dan Gurney and Parnelli Jones and so many of my heroes became really close friends. And I used to do events and, I wanted all my friends to meet Dan Gurney and Parnelli and be friends with them. And it's just kind of a natural thing. I enjoy, again, it all comes down to people. It doesn't matter if you got a Ferrari GTO and you're the last man on earth and you got nobody to share it with, it's not so much fun. Well, I just love sharing friendships and bringing people together, and it just means a lot to me. Now, I do it out of love and I do it out of respect. If I didn't want to do it or didn't respect a person, it doesn't happen either. And, we've done some projects together, Dan, and I do them purely I'm doing that company a favor by introducing him to Dan Kahn. If I didn't feel like you could make a difference, it just wouldn't happen. So it just comes from, I guess, maybe a judge of character and bringing people together and loving people. Nobody loves people more than me.
I think that's true. And I see it all the time. On another note, Bruce, another question I want to ask is the thing that, I've been to your collection dozens of times, and every time I have this impression, and I love seeing people's faces the first time they walk into your collection, because everyone has sort of the same reaction, which is that I think in the collector car world, most high-level collectors tend to sort of focus on like a thing. they're really into air-cooled Porsches, or they're really into French cars, or they're really into Ferraris. Your collection is so diverse. And I mean, you've got arguably probably one of the best hot rod collections ever assembled. You've got incredible race cars. You've got European stuff. You've got all these winning Le Mans cars. It's so, and then even when like you and Tom curate the Rodeo Drive Concours, we've had lowriders. We've had those kind of wasteland sort of Mad Max things. I mean, your taste is the most diverse of any car person I've ever met. I'm curious, as you think back on sort of the decades that you've been involved in all this, where do you see all this going? Do you think that, you know, what are the big changes you've seen, and do you think that we're in a good place? Is the next generation interested? You know, what's your take on car culture today?
Well, now that's a whole lot of different questions all bundled up.
You're right. Sorry. You're
Because
right.
no, because you know, I don't even like to use the word collection, because my garage is based on enthusiasm, and what I've selected, you know, and lucky enough to be the custodian for, are things that mean something to me. Uh, it's a very targeted purchase, and I probably overpaid for everything, but I just wanted that one. That being said, people say, "Oh, the young kids aren't interested in cars." Oh, yes, they are. You go to, you know, Ocean Avenue and Pebble Beach Week, or you go to, like we did a Cars and Coffee this weekend, called Treasured State, and there are plenty of people there. They're just not interested in what I have, you know. And I think, what if I'd have been, if I'd have looked, I never looked at it as an investment, because I haven't sold. I don't plan to sell. I just like what I have. But I should have bought an F40 and an F50 and an Enzo and a LaFerrari. Those are the cars that the young people seem to love. The supercars, the hypercars, the T50s, the Koenigsegg, the, you know, different cars. I think that's probably the future. And I think if you drive in a 275 GTB, they won't even take a picture with their iPhone, because they're looking for that. They're looking for the T50 or the rare hypercars and supercars. So I think cars have a great future. I just don't think the cars that I love are the future. They're more my generation. I think if you can go, I think for me, I bought what I liked. And if you buy what you like, you always love it, whether it's worth less than you paid for it or more than you paid for it. So I've always bought I've never bought with the idea I'm going to make some money on this car. I just never have, because I will lose money, I think, if I switch over. I don't think I'm that smart. But so I think the future's good. It's just not. It's just a different generation. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I think, I mean, I actually witnessed, my wife and I we were on Ocean Ave in Pebble. It was probably 2 or 3 years ago now. And it was early in the week. I think it was like a Wednesday. And we went down to Ocean to have dinner, and we parked and we were walking across the street, and I forget the name of the jeweler right there. That's a Rolex AD.
Fontaine.
Thank you. Right at that corner. And I walked up and I asked my wife, I said, "Sharon, hang on a second. I want to take a video of this, because this is insane. I feel like an anthropologist." Because on opposite corners, there was a pontoon fender TR and a Ferrari LaFerrari. And you're exactly right. There was this like orbiting ring of 20-something-year-olds kind of pacing around the LaFerrari, all with their phones out. And there was like 3 guys my age looking at the pontoon TR. And I'm like, this is so interesting, because the 20-year-olds have no concept of what's in front of them across the street. They have no idea. And so, but it doesn't matter, because they're enthusiasts. And I think at the end of the day, that's great.
I'm with you.
Because as long as they care, I don't care what they care about, right? They just care.
Yeah, and you look at like the LaFerraris and the Enzos. I mean, they're multi-millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the catalogs coming up for this new auction, and you can buy a 275 GTB. I mean, look, I don't want to sound so cavalier, like $2 million isn't a lot of money, but you know, it's $2 million, Class CK, every pedigree known to man, or for like 10 million, you could buy an Enzo, or there's no question which I'd rather have.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's just nuts.
I want to ask a question, Bruce, that, as somebody who's had just an unbelievable run and career building things, building events, making friendships, collecting incredible things, and also an incredible marriage, and you've raised an amazing family with wonderful kids and grandkids, and I've gotten to know one of your sons, Evan, a little bit, and he's a phenomenal guy. If you think back, and someone said, "What is your legacy? What do you hope people say about you? What was your legacy? Because you've done so much."
That's interesting. I've never worked towards a legacy. I guess it'll be what it is. I know there's some guys, especially out there now on Instagram, that want to be the richest man in Babylon, and that's never been. I never wanted to be the legacy. Well, he had the most toys, or he was the richest, or I just want to be remembered as a good person and a good friend.
Well, I think you've achieved that already.
Well, I thank God every day.
One last question from me, and then we have a few that we got from listeners that I want to go through in a kind of a lightning round. But I say all the time on the show that unfortunately I was not blessed with wisdom, and it's hard earned in my place, usually by messing stuff up and having to learn. As you think back on your career and on your life, what was one of the biggest mistakes you made, and what did you learn from it?
That's a really good question. And I would not change a day of my life. And I don't recall any like big mistakes. Financially, I made a lot of miscalculations, but it's never been about money. And at my age, if you can just get through to the end, that's just a good thing because you can't take it with you. But I really, financially, I've made plenty of mistakes. Selling something I shouldn't have, or not buying something that I should have. Those are the kind of things. They don't really haunt me because it's all about health and friendships. So I can't really pinpoint a big mistake. My career has been pleasurable and gratifying as imaginable.
Well, I appreciate that. And I will share a piece of advice that I've heard you give me and other people that I think about literally all the time, which is, and I'm paraphrasing, so tell me if I'm getting it wrong, but it's make it hurt once.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my mantra. Buy the best and cry only once. And that's whether it's a car, I've had friends of mine, I've bought a car that, you could buy that for a whole lot less. Well, and then you may have to put a lot into it, and then you just, it becomes not a pleasant experience.
So I just say
buy the best and cry only once. Is that the one you?
Yeah, that's the one.
I live by that.
I have to do the HVAC in my house, and I told that to my wife. I said, you know what, let's just do it once, and then for the next 20 years we don't have to deal with it again.
That's right. That's right.
All right, we have a couple questions here. The first one is from Pat Curtin, who clearly must know your taste because his question is very specific. He said, Bruce, if you had to drive across the country in a pre-1960 vehicle, not including a 300 SL, what would it be?
Well, because that's what I would say, a 300 SL. I would be a Porsche, because I'm not terribly mechanical, and I don't want to have any roadside problems. Some guys just thrive on things going wrong, not me. So I would just say probably I've had a little 57 Porsche for 40 years, a coupe. I took it, I shipped it to Chicago and drove it out old Route 66. So I would say that, but if it's something more meaningful, I would say a 300 SL, but
Okay.
Porsche, yeah.
And another question we have is, who is someone in the car world that you look up to because you're such a hero to so many?
Well, I look up to Terry Cargus. I just look up to guys like, I think growing up, my hero is Parnelli Jones. And as I learned more, it was Parnelli and Dan Gurney. And up at Dan Gurney now as one of the greatest Americans ever. As a driver, an innovator, certainly a handsome guy, and raised a beautiful family. Evie and Justin and Alex, so strong. So I would say probably Gurney's my hero. I wouldn't be where I am today without Robert E. Peterson, or that friendship and Hot Rod Magazine. So I just look up. I say God's plan is. I'm grateful every day.
I love it. Okay, and then just a couple more here.
Sure.
From Brian Dorr, he said, "I think the Peterson Museum is truly amazing. In a dream world, if you could change anything about it to create what you consider the ultimate automotive museum, what would you change, if anything?"
Well, I wouldn't change anything at the Peterson, but if we had more room, I would put a theater in there.
Okay.
And so that we could do more, because there's so many great films, historic films. I think that there's an opportunity there. Like you go into some museums, you have kind of an orientation film. I think that's probably one thing we could do, and maybe tell the story of Robert E. Peterson and how important he was, and some of our heroes that we're celebrating. Maybe that would be the only thing I'd change. But Brian Stevens, our director of exhibits,
he's brilliant. Yeah, he is.
Unbelievable. And what he has put, yeah, I don't want to say too much to get somebody to come and steal it.
He is. I every time I talk to that guy, I learn something. He's,
and he's so well spoken.
Yeah.
He's so bright, buttoned down and fit, and God, everything.
I love it. All right. Last question from the listeners is from Rich Doucette. And he said, "I know you have one of the most incredible car collections. If you could only keep one car, which one would it be?" That's wow.
You know what? The Cobra.
Okay.
I say a blind squirrel can come up with an acorn and that was my acorn. I found that car over 20 years ago and at a car event in Paris, France. The car was shipped to Paris. It's the very first Cobra ever built, serial number 1, CSX 2001. It was raced in Europe. It was upgraded by Ford Racing. And it's kind of my gen. Like Bruce Canepa took me for a ride in a McLaren P1, and I couldn't even mentally put together how fast things were going. It was just, but the Cobra is my generation. I could put my foot into it and think I'm Dan Gurney or Parnelli Jones, or I feel like good about it. And I'm probably going 60 miles an hour, but if it was a Bugatti or a T50, I'd probably be doing 100 and a quarter. So it's just, that would be my car. I love that car. And Carroll Shelby was a good friend. That was another guy I met that just stories and history and did it amazing. Carroll Shelby, I can't say enough about how much I admire him.
Well, you picked a good one. That is, I think, my favorite car in your collection too. Every time I go to your garage, I just stand there and stare at it. It's a piece. May
not be the prettiest, but
I think it is. I think it's stunning.
Deep
I love that car. I love it. Well, Bruce, this has been a fantastic conversation. Where can people learn more about you and all the things you're involved in and find you online if they wanted to?
Well, I think the Peterson Museum is a good start. We started a thing called the California Highway Patrol 1199 Foundation. I'm very involved in that. And a group was started by a friend of mine who passed away, and then a group of us got together and kept it going. And any car thing with people, we didn't get to talk about Rodeo Drive, but that is a car show on Father's Day, and you're very involved in the success and that. Thank you, Dan. We had 50,000 people through there. It's a free car show and maybe one of the best car shows in the world. Free Father's Day. So any one of those places.
So Peterson.org. And then, 1199 Foundation. And then the Rodeo Drive Concours. You're right. You had so many great stories. We didn't get into it, but I'm very fortunate that we've gotten to help with that a little bit. And it's an incredible thing because, like you said, it's free. And
it's free.
And it's really easy to find because it's always on Father's Day. So it's just show up. And to me, my favorite thing about rodeo is not even the cars, because it's so different than most concours, because there's so many kids and there's so many families, and it's so neat. I think because it's free and because it's in the heart of the city, that my favorite thing is you see like 3-year-olds on dad's shoulders as they're walking around and they're pointing at different stuff. And you guys do such a good job getting such an eclectic. It's not just a bunch of pre-war long hood cars, which I like, but it's supercars and crazy custom cars, and it's everything.
And that's that's really, you said it. There's something there for everybody. And it's, like you say, it's easy to find. Everybody knows where Beverly Hills is. Father's Day. And it's a day that, if you want to do something for your dad, I can guarantee you he'll enjoy it.
If anyone listening wants to learn more about that for next year, it's very straightforward. It's rodeodrive-bh.com. So that's the website for the Rodeo Drive Committee. And
you produced a beautiful video for that too, Dan. Thank you very much. So I don't know if that's the link or not, but
it is. It's on there, and I encourage people, if you've not been to that show, it's different than any concours you've probably ever been to. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for this conversation. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on Only the Strong Survive. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. I'm Dan Kahn, and we'll see you next time.